My name is Cecilia Van Doncelar of the Mary Isham Keefe chapter of the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution. Today's date is October 20th, 2020, and this interview is being conducted in Columbia Falls, Montana for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. We are interviewing former Staff Sergeant John H. Wise, who served in the Vietnam War. So John, would you like to further introduce yourself?
Yes, John Wise. John H. Wise.
And if you want to go through some of the information there about your birth date and your parents' information.
Okay, I was born on June 11th, 1946 in Craig, Colorado. My wife's name is Nanette. She goes by Nan Wise. Her date of birth is 8/25/67. I have 4 daughters: Angela, Kimberly, Jackie, and Ashley. All girls except one live in Colorado. My father was Robert Lee Wise. He was born in December of 1906 in Meeker, Colorado. My mother, Georgina Rail Wise, she was born in 1924. My mother's place of birth was in Avondale, Colorado, which is near Pueblo, Colorado. My brother's name, my half-brother, is Wilfred Christopher Rail. I have a sister, her name is Roberta Jean Wise. I happen to be the baby of the family. Family members who served in the military was Henry Rail, Richard Banner, Eloy Garcia, and Zeb Wise. Zeb Wise was my grandfather. He served in the Spanish-American War. The day I left home from the military was October of 1964.
Okay, John, so if you will, just tell your story, starting from that date that you entered the military.
Well, when I entered the military, my first stop was the induction center in Denver, Colorado. And I actually joined with a friend and neighbor on the buddy program. And after we got to Denver and did our physicals, we got split up because he had a spot on his lung. They wanted to make sure he didn't have any type of illness. So I thought we would hook up again at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas, but we didn't. And I didn't see him again probably for 40 years. So anyway, I did boot camp at Lackland Air Force Base, and then after boot camp, I was transferred to Chanute Air Force Base in Illinois for technical school. I was trained on B-52s, bombers, and KC-135 or C-135 cargo airplanes while I was there, in aircraft fuel systems technicians, specialists. After I graduated from technical school, I was then assigned to Hickam Air Force Base, Hawaii. I served there from 1964 to 1967 with the 1502nd Military Airlift Command and the 62nd Airlift Command. I was then transferred from there to Tennessee, to Seward Air Force Base in Tennessee, to a tactical squadron. I worked on C-130s there. And we also did TDYs into England, Germany, Greece, Lebanon, and we did a rotation with the sister squadron. The squadron I was assigned to was the 61st Tactical Airlift Command. Then I came to the point where I was just about due to be discharged because I had done my 4 years. So I extended, transferred to command and control, and also volunteered for Vietnam. When I applied for Vietnam, they actually sent me to northwest Thailand, or correction, northeast Thailand, to Udon, Thailand. I was assigned to the 432nd Field Maintenance Squadron at Udon. Primary duty there was actually working on F-4 fighters, fighter bombers, and RF-4C reconnaissance aircraft. Also some C-130 aircraft and helicopters. That was from February 1969 to February 70. I got to say, one of the primary reasons I volunteered to go to Vietnam was because of what had happened to friends. Probably, well, factually, there's about 80% of all the combat missions flown into North Vietnam were actually flown out of bases in Thailand. The base I was at was considered to be in a war zone. It wasn't too bad. We had more sapper attacks than not, and our perimeter was sprayed with Agent Orange to clear the vegetation away from the base, approximately 100 meters. Other than having a few sapper attacks, we're in pretty good shape. I did have a mission in Laos it was a recovery for a Super Jolly Green Giant, which is an HH-53 helicopter that was utilized to pick up downed pilots that were shot down either in Laos or in North Vietnam. So on January 16th, I was asked to volunteer for that mission, and I did. So the next day, on January the 17th, after I picked up all survival gear and weapons, we flew north into areas south of the Plain of Jars, Laos. We were dropped off by the HH-53 and a crew, and then we had to fix the helicopter flat out of there. The battle damage was so bad that we couldn't do anything with the aircraft fuel system, so I helped the crew chief repair the hydraulic system that had been damaged, battle damaged. We were on the ground probably, I don't know, 6 or 8 hours, and of course it was radio blackout, so we couldn't tell anybody where we were. We finally got out of there, and approximately 20 minutes after we left, the base was overran. When we got back to Thailand, our maintenance squadron commander and shop chief and all greeted us because they thought we were MIA. Anyway, I finished my tour with the Air Force February 1970. One thing I want to say is the VA has finally addressed the fact that all the bases in Thailand were actually sprayed with defoliants, commonly known as Asian orange. And there's thousands of Thailand vets that were exposed and have different illnesses, such as myself. When I left Thailand, we flew back through Vietnam into Japan and then to Fairbanks, Alaska, and back to Travis Air Force Base, where I was discharged in February of 1970. After my military service in the Air Force, I joined the Colorado State Patrol, and I served with them for 29 and a half years. I retired as a district commander with the rank of major, and then I volunteered for a mission in Kosovo with the United Nations, with the American contingent. So I spent 2 years there helping train and stand up the Kosovar police services. Then in 2002, I was asked to volunteer for a mission in Iraq as a civilian police officer. So I signed up for that mission and served in Iraq as an American police officer, embedded with the military police. I was there for 2 years, and while there, the team that I was with stood up the Iraqi Highway Patrol. I was injured while I was there with a IED explosion and had to terminate my employment and came home. About 9 months later, after I recruited, I went ahead and signed up again and went back to Iraq for another 15 months. I'm serving in northwestern Iraq, in Mosul. Then again, after that mission was over, I signed up again and was deployed to Afghanistan for 2 years. All these missions were to develop the police services in Iraq and Afghanistan. My last mission was from 2010-11 when I worked with Cal Brown and Root as a field security manager. We did all the internal security I was in charge of seven different bases as a field security manager. So I had a team of officers that worked under me to maintain security inside. Then we moved from Colorado to Montana. Here we are. So I'm a Vietnam veteran. I belong to Vietnam Veterans of America, Northwest Chapter 1087. I also belong to VFW and the American Legion. So that's pretty much my story.
Thank you for coming and allowing me to interview with you, and so appreciate your service. You've served over a long period of time. How long was that from?
Well, I started serving in 1964 and I finished in 2011 and actually worked as a security manager at the airport up here for 18 months.
Okay.
So from 18 to about 68 years old.
Wow. I'm going to stop this for just a minute.
Okay.
And, okay. We are continuing with our interview with former Staff Sergeant John Wise. So we'll let him begin some more detail of his experiences.
I guess probably one of the experiences that I should share is just actually going to Vietnam from California to start with, which was interesting in itself because you never know what you're going to get into until you get there. But anyway, we had a full flight, a full aircraft full of GIs and airmen, Navy personnel that flew out of Travis Air Force Base. And what was interesting is we actually first stop out of Travis, which is in California, was Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii, which I had been previously stationed at. So that was kind of interesting. But then we island hopped from there to Midway. Guam, the Philippines, and then into Vietnam. And at Vietnam, we had to deplane and get on a civilian aircraft, a contract aircraft. So that put all of us on the ground in Vietnam, the same way coming out. And then we went into Bangkok, and then they split us all up. They flew us all to different bases. when I first got to Udon, Thailand, we were assigned to a barracks. And what was interesting is the barracks were made out of teak wood by the Japanese during World War II. And then we were assigned to our field maintenance squadron and started working. And the thing that I recall that really got to me was the fact that you see these guys, these fighter pilots and reconnaissance pilots, taxiing out with a full bomb load or flying a reconnaissance mission, and you know they're going up north. And I didn't really keep track of the names of the missions because we were too busy. We worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. But what really concerned me then as a staff sergeant, I also had a crew working for me, was to make sure that everything that we did was right, because their lives depended on what we did. And there were incidences where we had horrific crashes on the base. Just prior to my birthday, in June, we had a F-105 fighter bomber that was damaged, that was trying to make a landing at Udon because we had one of the longest runways up north. But the pilot had to eject. Excuse me. And they put out a call for volunteers to donate blood. And his blood type was the same as mine, which is it's a fairly rare blood type, it's A negative. And out of all the personnel on the base, it was probably several thousand, there was only 2 of us that had that blood type. So I donated my blood to that pilot. And what I don't know, and I wish I did know, is if he survived. I know they had to evac him to, I think it was Japan. So he was hurt pretty bad. Also while I was there, because I had a command and control background in what the Air Force calls AFSC, Air Force Specialties. I was augmented to the Mobile Command and Control Unit. And what they responded to was critical incidents, like aircraft crashes, that sort of thing. Chemical spills. Anything that resulted in an accident that jeopardized base personnel and equipment. We had an F-4, I think it was about halfway through my tour, came in with battle damage. And the way we set up for aircraft coming in that has battle damage, you have a crash recovery truck that had 7 personnel on it, a command and control truck, and of course a fire truck. But the way they were set up just in front of where the aircraft would land. And they also had to use, the F-4 fighters have a hook on the back of the tail that drops down, because they're used by the Navy and Marine Corps too. Or were. And they would set up a barrier, which was a big cable across the runway to catch the airplane when it came in. On this particular day, the F-4 was trying to make it back into base, and when he landed, he offset to the right and actually pulled the barrier out of the ground. And when he did, he ran directly into the crash recovery truck. The entire crew was killed. We had another incident where RF-4C was coming in, and they have a front seat or a back seat pilot. The pilot in the front seat was trying to have communications with the what we call the bear in the back seat, and he wouldn't answer him. Well, when they landed, they discovered that he had actually been shot and killed in his mission north. So the Thailand vets were on the bases. Did we see direct combat? Probably not. I know the closest I got to it was when I was on the ground in Laos, because the base was, you could tell that the enemy was getting closer and closer to the base, and we got out of it just in time. But the airmen that served on bases in Thailand, I think, sacrificed as much, maybe not as much, because the grunts, they had it tough. But we sacrificed a lot just to make sure that we supported them, because the majority of our missions were flown to take out all the convoys and all the weapons and ammunition and personnel that were coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And the Ho Chi Minh Trail actually came into Laos, and the North Vietnamese really, really wanted very hard to take Thailand, so they could use Thailand as a place so they could also support their troops in South Vietnam. So we had a lot of missions flown into Laos, and we had a lot of personnel stationed up there. And of course, the base I was at Udorn was home base for Air America, which you may have heard of. They allegedly supported the Laotian people with supplies and food and medicine and so forth. But they also flew combat missions in Laos, just as we did. I guess I would like to emphasize the fact that, you know, a lot of people don't understand, and I've had many problems with the VA with medical issues about the bases being sprayed with Agent Orange defoliants in Thailand. The air policemen that work the perimeters, if they get ill with different cancers or heart problems, they're awarded compensation through the VA because they were on the perimeter. What the VA doesn't understand is that, like myself, I was on the perimeter almost every day, but they won't accept that because of my particular expertise that I had as far as aircraft fuel systems technician. But we had to maintain aircraft that were actually on the perimeter. For instance, I'll give you for instance. On an F-4 Phantom, they have an in-flight refueling system. And it's like a trap door that opens up, and then the tanker has a probe that goes into the aircraft fuel system to refuel the aircraft while they're in flight. Well, a lot of times those would malfunction. And the only way that we could test them is we had a probe that we had to put into the aircraft fuel system receiver. But the only way we could do that was we had to go to the perimeter that had been sprayed with Agent Orange and run the aircraft up to almost afterburner on the throttles, check to make sure that sucker would work. So the same stood true for working on larger aircraft, like a C-130. They always took them out on the perimeter. The Phantoms we worked on, they had them parked in revetments, and we may be working on a fuel system on this side of the taxiway, and then on the other side of the taxiway they were loading bombs and rockets. Fuels is very explosive. When you open up a fuel cell on an aircraft, it should be isolated away from everything and grounded, and the tank's purged. But because of the war effort, and because of the quick turnarounds we had to do, we worked on right next to where other maintenance was being done or munitions was being loaded onto aircraft. I can only hope that my story about being in the Air Force and being in aircraft maintenance can reflect what all the other maintenance people did on aircraft to support the war effort in Vietnam.
Do you continue to see any of your war buddies?
I kept contact with them for a while, and we just seemed to kind of disappear. And I've tried over and over again to recontact some of my better friends that were in the Air Force with me, and I just can't find them.
Yes.
I don't know if they're alive or dead or where they're at even.
How would you say that your experiences affected your life over the many years since
Well,
then?
I think the service grounded me in the fact that the greater good sometimes is serving your fellow man versus serving yourself. So I took that path when I went into law enforcement, when I served in Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan. I know in Kosovo, one of the reasons I went over there was because I saw photographs of the Albanians that looked like they were in POW camps, concentration camps, and it just affected me. I think the military, you go in as a youngster. So I was 18 years old. I'd received my draft notice for my physical when I joined the Air Force, because my friend I went with joined on the buddy system that I never saw for 40 more years. He wanted me to go in the Air Force with him, and I thought that was a good deal, so I could learn a trade other than just being an infantryman. So I think that all young men and women should serve the country in one way or the other. And I think probably the military is one of the better ways. It makes you into an adult.
Right. Would you like to share any of your experiences when you first got back and how you received back to your family, maybe your neighborhood, your community?
Well, I graduated from high school in Grand Junction, Colorado, and my first wife, was there with my children, my two daughters at the time. So when I got back home, I got discharged at Travis Air Force Base, and they bused us over to San Francisco International Airport. And one of the things that I recall, and I asked a question to the bus driver, which was a Air Force NCO. I said, how come there's screens on the windows of these buses? And he said, because people will be throwing things at you. And I could feel the tension at the airport. I was in full uniform. I was proud of what I had, my accommodations. I was proud that I had served my country. But people would avoid even getting near me. But I made it home, and my wife and two girls greeted me. And of course they were happy to see me. But even in Grand Junction, Colorado, people avoided me. So I don't even have any of my uniforms anymore. I got rid of them. I didn't even mention the fact that I was in the service for many years because of the way the Vietnam vets had been treated. Even for a few years after I got out, veterans of foreign wars, the VFW, wouldn't even accept the fact that we were veterans of a foreign war. But it seemed to have changed after the first Iraqi war. People started recognizing vets better. So I'm thankful for that. And here we are today.
Well, there are many, many of us that were truly thankful about what you did for us.
Well, I think that people recognize the fact that we were there to serve our country, and we were there to support our Army and Marines that were on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, again, thank you so much for coming and giving your story. And again, thank you for your tremendous service to the United States. And we appreciate you.